Hello, music teacher friends. Welcome to episode number 53 of the Beyond Measure podcast. My name is Christina Whitlock, and I am here to be your anytime piano teacher friend. So, thanks for being here today. Today, we are here to talk about the ins and outs of making exceptions in our studio. And that could be exceptions to our studio policies, exceptions to the students we choose to bring on, exceptions to our teaching hours, whatever it might be. And based on the fact that I am someone who has spent the last two episodes talking about how I am somewhat flexible in my expectations of practice every now and again, you might be surprised at my stance on making exceptions. The truth is, I really hate making exceptions when it comes to studio policies or any kind of personal boundary that I have set for myself. And I really try, as hard as I can, to avoid it at all costs. I don't offer exceptions very often at all. You should probably know this about me. I like rules. I love rules, actually. I like having them, and I like following them, and I like consistency. I like clear parameters so everyone always knows where they stand. I like knowing what is expected out of me and what I can expect from others. And I really dislike making exceptions because it blurs the lines on all of those things. And actually, I think relationships of pretty much every kind thrive with those kinds of parameters. Knowing what exactly is expected of us and what we can expect from other people is generally a really healthy way to function. So, again, by and large, I do not make exceptions. Definitely not in the collegiate courses I teach, for the record, but also not so much in my private studio. So, you see, I'm not always so easygoing and accommodating, right? Let's just put this in perspective for a moment. When you look at the profession of studio music teaching over the last, century or so, I am so proud. I mean, seriously, so proud of how far we have come in establishing ourselves as studio owners and teachers. The way we have been able to raise our standards of professionalism and the way that we have embraced the necessity of a business-savvy mindset. The way we have asserted ourselves to expect fair treatment. That is all something that we should celebrate in a big way. We are standing tall on the shoulders of those who have gone before us, and we are continuing to pave the way for future generations. And I, for one, absolutely love being a link in that chain. So, I feel like we've come a really long way from old-fashioned stereotypes of what a music teacher does. And I also think we have to be mindful not to take that too far sometimes. So here is rule-loving, policy-following me here to remind you that, hey, we deal with human beings for a living. And much to my dismay, things are just not always as clear as being in black and white. Avoiding exceptions altogether is pretty difficult. There are valid reasons from time to time where you might find it appropriate to bend a policy or alter it in some way for someone. But here is the real deal. Any exception you offer, whether that is to your attendance policy, your tuition payment structure, your schedule, whatever it might be, You have to be so at peace with that exception that you are not going to expect anything in return from your clients. That sounds kind of wrong, doesn't it? I know those of us who like life to be fair want to live on standards that say, hey, I bent the rules for you over here, so you'll be extra flexible with me later down the road, right? Well, I know that there are teachers out there who claim, something like, I'm very flexible for my students, and they're always very flexible with me in return. And hey, if that is your experience, I am delighted for you. But I will say that my experience has taught me that families just don't tend to have the same recall for exceptions that you've done for them versus any they feel like they might have made for you. It's just not how it seems to work. I have been at this teaching gig for 26 years, my friends. I always say that I have been just about every kind of teacher. I was the teacher who had absolutely no clue what she was doing. I was also the teacher who made a big leap into implementing a structured studio policy. I've been the teacher more focused on proving myself in a new community than I should have been. I've been the teacher whose policy was too strict. And yes, I have also been the teacher who has bent over backwards, being extra accommodating to student families in every way possible, only to sulk and complain about it to my family later. And, of course, also to end up taking great offense later down the line when I felt somehow disrespected. So, let's say you have a family who is routinely late in paying for their lessons, or whom you agreed to teach for less money than other students. Or maybe you've made exceptions to your no makeup policy for someone, or feel as though you've jumped through ridiculous hoops to accommodate schedules in some way. Maybe it's a student you weren't even going to take on, but for whatever reason, you decided to do so anyway. Parents who pick their kids up late, and you bite your tongue and don't complain. Students who hold you to different standards by request of their parents, or whatever. Pick your scenario. We all know that we encounter these things quite a bit. Now, I want you to imagine, for whatever reason, that family that you made that exception for, well, they suddenly decide to leave your studio with no notice. Doesn't your brain go straight into defensive mode and scoff over how they could possibly leave your studio after all you had done for them? I know it does, because I've experienced it, and I know that I hear it from teachers all the time. We hear things like, I can't believe they quit after all the reschedules I let them get away with, or I can't believe they didn't finish out the term when I was giving them such a hefty discount. Or, I don't know, maybe we just tell them in our heads, good luck with your next teacher who will definitely not be as accommodating as me. Now, for the record, I could easily go down a dark road here and begin a rant over the various types of rude treatment that teachers like us have endured in our careers, but that doesn't really help anything, does it? So, what I have learned is this. If I am considering an exception to a policy, whether that's by my own ideas or by a parental request, it has to be an exception I am willing to make without any kind of expectation from the student that I'm making it for. If I am contemplating bending a policy for someone, I imagine how I would feel if, months from now, something went sour in that relationship. I am very thankful that hardly ever happens. But then again, it kind of only takes once before you learn to put your guard up a little bit, right? So, if my relationship ended with a particular studio family, am I going to feel resentful that I made this exception that I'm considering? Would I be tempted to hold it against them? And if that answer is yes, I don't make the exception. I just don't. Because I'm doing it to myself. Again, I do believe there is a time and a place for understanding and flexibility. If your payments are due on the 7th day of the month, but you have a family who asks politely if they could have until the 15th instead, well, if you can swing it and you're not going to harbor feelings that will make you feel taken advantage of, then sure, do it. But if you are ultimately going to resent them for it, or if it puts you in some kind of stressful financial position, your answer is no. P.S. Have you ever noticed that the families you end up flexing for the most are the ones who will end up complaining or leaving the studio in some kind of dramatic fashion? I always think it's like some weird twist on Murphy's Law or something, but it definitely seems to be the case. So, friends, anyway, I hope today was a helpful look into the caution we must exercise when it comes to making exceptions. As compassionate human beings, we, of course, need to remain open to the needs of others. But we also have to maintain boundaries in our professional lives that are going to allow us to keep teaching happily for years and years to come. Teachers who feel taken advantage of are not good teachers. You cannot be your best self if you are feeling taken advantage of. The slipperiest slope towards discontentment is neglecting our own needs and our own boundaries. So, with all that in mind, let's raise our glasses and toast one another, shall we? Music teacher friends of the world. People are tricky business, aren't they? It's hard to accept sometimes that we operate in a transactional relationship with our studio families. I know that I attach to people quickly and deeply, and I want to think that they have my back every bit as much as I have theirs. And to some extent, the incredible families that I attract in my studio really do. But at the end of the day, they are paying us for a service, and it's really up to us to determine exactly what that service looks like without muddying the waters with too many exceptions. So, all that considered, I raise my glass of empowerment to you, my discerning teacher friends. Hear, hear. Okay, thank you for listening to episode 53 of the Beyond Measure podcast. Here in the States, we are preparing to celebrate Thanksgiving. And just as I reminded you last year at this time, back in episode number 8, I think it is still a perfect time to express your gratitude toward any content creators that you appreciate. So, in that same vein, go tell someone how much you love this podcast today. Send a link of your favorite episode of whatever podcast or blog or project that you're loving to some of your friends. Of course, written reviews on Apple Podcasts are always appreciated. And personally, I'd love if you would come follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Beyond Measure Podcast. Oh, the holidays are a-comin', my friends. It's now more important than ever that we concentrate on working hard, resting well, and being nice. Take care of yourself, my friends.